Decision-making is an intrinsic part of human existence. From the simplest choices, such as what to have for breakfast, to the most complex decisions concerning relationships, careers, and moral dilemmas, every moment of our lives is shaped by our decisions. But what drives our choices? Are we purely logical beings governed by reason, or are our decisions influenced by emotions, biases, and subconscious influences? Furthermore, what role does philosophy play in understanding decision-making? These questions have intrigued both psychologists and philosophers for centuries, and in this exploration, we will examine how psychology and philosophy intersect in the realm of decision-making. The psychological framework of decision-making. At its core, decision-making in psychology is the process by which individuals choose between alternatives. This process involves both cognitive and emotional factors, and psychologists have long sought to understand how people weigh options, predict outcomes, and ultimately select a course of action. One of the key models in psychology is dual process theory, which posits that decision-making occurs through two distinct systems. System 1, automatic, fast, and often unconscious, and System 2, deliberate, slow, and conscious. System 1 is characterized by heuristics, mental shortcuts that help people make quick judgments with minimal cognitive effort. These heuristics are often useful in situations where speed is critical, such as in making snap decisions based on limited information. However, they can also lead to biases, such as overconfidence, availability bias, relying on easily recalled information, or confirmation bias, favoring information that confirms pre-existing beliefs. System 2 is engaged when individuals need to apply more careful reasoning. It's used when a decision is complex, requires careful thought, or involves weighing long-term consequences. In contrast to System 1, which operates effortlessly, System 2 demands cognitive resources and time. The philosopher Immanuel Kant might have aligned this system with his view of practical reasoning, decisions made through a process of rational deliberation. While these systems are separate, they are not mutually exclusive. In fact, both systems often work together to influence our final decisions. The role of emotions in decision-making. Psychological research has also shown that emotions play a significant role in decision-making, often in ways that challenge the traditional notion of the rational decision-maker. Psychologist Antonio Damasio's somatic marker hypothesis argues that emotions help guide our decisions by associating specific outcomes with emotional responses. In other words, emotions are a form of internal feedback that shapes our judgments, often without us even realizing it. This concept challenges the classical view of decision-making as purely rational and logical. From a philosophical perspective, this aligns with David Hume's view of human nature. In his treatise of human nature, Hume famously argued that reason is the slave of the passions. That is, emotions and desires often drive our decisions, and reason merely justifies them after the fact. This viewpoint highlights the complexity of human decision-making and how emotions often intertwine with logic in ways we may not consciously recognize. Cognitive biases and their impact. In addition to emotions, cognitive biases significantly shape our decisions. Cognitive biases are systematic patterns of deviation from norm or rationality in judgment, which often lead to perceptual distortion, inaccurate judgment, or illogical interpretation. These biases can skew decision-making in profound ways. Some of the most common cognitive biases include confirmation bias, the tendency to search for, interpret, and recall information that confirms our pre-existing beliefs or hypotheses, while disregarding evidence that contradicts them. For example, when deciding whether to buy a new car, someone may focus only on positive reviews of the car they are considering and ignore the negative ones. Anchoring bias. The reliance on the first piece of information encountered, the anchor, when making decisions. For instance, when negotiating a price, the initial offer serves as a reference point, and subsequent negotiations tend to be biased by this initial value. Overconfidence bias. The tendency for people to overestimate their own abilities, knowledge, or the accuracy of their judgments. Overconfidence can lead to risky decisions without proper consideration of possible negative outcomes. Loss aversion. people tend to prefer avoiding losses to acquiring equivalent gains. This bias, explored in prospect theory by psychologists Daniel Kahneman and Amos Tversky, suggests that the fear of losing something is psychologically more powerful than the potential for gaining something of equal value. These biases have clear implications for decision-making in both personal and professional contexts. They also pose a challenge to the classical view of human beings as rational agents, free from emotional or cognitive distortions, the influence of social and environmental factors. Decision-making is also heavily influenced by social and environmental factors. Social psychology explores how group dynamics, cultural norms, and social pressures shape our choices. For example, in the context of group decision-making, individuals may be influenced by groupthink, a phenomenon in which the desire for harmony or conformity in a group leads to irrational or dysfunctional decision-making. Moreover, environmental cues, such as the framing of a choice, the presence of others, or even the time of day, can have a surprising impact on our decisions. Nudge theory, developed by behavioral economists Richard Thaler and Cass Sunstein, shows that small changes in the way options are presented can significantly alter decision outcomes. For example, placing healthier food options at eye level in a cafeteria can encourage better dietary choices. Philosophical perspectives on decision-making. Philosophy has long pondered the nature of human decision-making. The question of what makes a good decision and how we should approach choices is central to many branches of philosophy, particularly ethics, existentialism, and epistemology. 1. Ethical decision-making. In ethics, philosophers have explored how moral considerations shape decision-making. Should we always act in ways that maximize the greatest good for the greatest number, as utilitarianism suggests? Or should we follow moral duties and principles, regardless of the consequences, as deontologists like Immanuel Kant argue? Kant's concept of the categorical imperative emphasizes that individuals must act according to principles that could be universally applied. This ethical framework suggests that our decisions should not be guided solely by emotions, desires, or the potential outcomes of a decision, but by a rational commitment to duty and moral law. This aligns with the function of System 2 in psychological theory, which emphasizes reasoned deliberation. On the other hand, virtue ethics, as espoused by Aristotle, focuses on the development of character and the cultivation of virtues like courage, wisdom, and temperance. From this standpoint, decision-making is a reflection of one's inner moral character and the ability to balance various virtues in the pursuit of eudaimonia, flourishing. 2. Existentialism and the freedom of choice. Existentialist philosophers such as Jean-Paul Sartre emphasize the freedom of choice and the responsibility that comes with it. According to Sartre, we are condemned to be free, meaning that we must make choices without relying on external authorities or predetermined structures. Every decision we make defines who we are and shapes our identity. This existential freedom can be both liberating and overwhelming, as it places the burden of responsibility entirely on the individual. Sartre's ideas highlight a critical psychological component of decision-making, the dread or anxiety that often accompanies the realization of total freedom. The fear of making the wrong choice or of facing the consequences of one's actions can lead to avoidance behaviors or decision paralysis. From a psychological perspective, this phenomenon is often discussed in terms of cognitive dissonance, where conflicting thoughts or feelings cause discomfort, leading individuals to seek ways to reduce this tension. 3. Rationality and irrationality. The tension between reason and irrationality is a central theme in both psychology and philosophy. Descartes, the father of modern philosophy, famously claimed that, "I think, therefore I am," placing rational thought at the center of human existence. According to Descartes, our ability to reason logically and systematically is what sets humans apart from animals and is the foundation of all decision-making. However, as we've seen from psychological studies on cognitive biases and emotional influences, human beings do not always behave rationally. Philosophers such as Friedrich Nietzsche critique the ideal of pure rationality, suggesting that human beings are driven by irrational forces, including instincts, desires, and cultural influences. Nietzsche's view challenges the assumption that decision-making is always based on logical deliberation, proposing instead that emotions and unconscious drives play a significant role in shaping our choices. Conclusion: the psychology behind decision-making is complex, involving a delicate interplay between cognition, emotion, biases, and social influences. Psychologists have developed various models and theories to explain how individuals make choices, while philosophers have grappled with the ethical, existential, and rational dimensions of decision-making for centuries. In the end, decision-making is not a purely rational process, but rather a multifaceted phenomenon that involves both conscious reasoning and unconscious influences. Philosophy and psychology together offer a richer understanding of the human experience, reminding us that our choices are shaped by both the mind and the heart. Understanding the psychology of decision-making can help individuals become more self-aware, recognize biases, and make better choices in their lives. By integrating philosophical insights with psychological research, we can better navigate the complexities of human existence and make decisions that reflect both our values and our cognitive capacities.